We treat the Federalist Papers like the sacred blueprint of American democracy. I mean, they're constantly quoted by Supreme Court justices and revered by historians.
Right, they're held up as this ultimate instruction manual for how the government is actually supposed to work.
Exactly. But what if I told you that this massive, brilliant PR campaign, like the most ambitious one in American history, completely failed its primary mission?
It's honestly the ultimate historical irony.
Yeah.
You know, the men who wrote these essays poured staggering amounts of intellect into them.
Yeah, 85 separate arguments.
Right, 85 of them. And they were all aimed at this highly specific, immediate goal in the state of New York. And by almost every metric, the voters there entirely ignored them.
Okay, so we really need to unpack this today. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. If you are joining us, we are looking at an extensive Wikipedia article covering the history, the authorship, and the legacy of the Federalist Papers.
And our mission here is to strip away all that marble statue reverence and look at the actual messy, high-stakes scramble behind the scenes.
Yeah, we want to decode exactly what Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay actually contributed. And to make all this dense 18th century political jargon digestible for you, we're going to use an analogy.
A very relatable one, I think.
Right. We're going to view this whole historical event through the lens of something we have all survived, which is the ultimate high school group project.
It is surprisingly fitting. I mean, you've got a strict deadline, a project the whole school's future depends on, and a hostile environment.
Not to mention a group of guys trying to coordinate completely different skill sets to build defense of a brand new government system.
Exactly. And just to set some ground rules for you listening, as we go through this, our goal isn't to take sides in the historical Federalist versus anti-Federalist debate.
Or modern politics, for that matter.
Right. We're just impartially reporting on the ideas in these sources. We want to look at the architecture of their arguments, not endorse them.
So let's set the stage. It's the fall of 1787. What is the crisis that forces this group project to even happen?
Well, the United States is not a unified powerhouse at this point. It's this loose, fragile confederation operating under the Articles of Confederation.
Which everyone basically agrees was a total disaster.
A catastrophic failure. The national government has no power to tax, no power to draft an army, and they can't even regulate commerce between the states.
Okay, so in our high school analogy, the Articles of Confederation are the current student council rules.
Right.
And the rules are pure chaos. Like, the council can't raise money for prom, the clubs are fighting over rooms, and the principal is threatening to just shut the whole school down.
That's a perfect parallel. So a group of delegates goes to Philadelphia, locks themselves in a room for the summer, and completely tears up the old rules.
They write the new Constitution.
Yes, a massive overhaul creating a strong central government. But just because they wrote it, that doesn't make it law. The states have to actually vote to ratify it.
The student body has to vote yes on the new rules, but almost immediately there's this huge backlash.
It's exactly. Late September 1787, writers in New York start publishing these fierce attacks on the proposed Constitution in the local papers.
Using burner accounts, basically.
Yeah, Roman pseudonyms like Cato and Brutus. These are the anti-federalists. And they are arguing that this new central government is going to obliterate state sovereignty.
They're saying it'll destroy individual liberties.
Right. They paint it as a one-way ticket back to the tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
They literally just fought a revolution to escape.
So they're spamming the school message boards saying, don't vote for these rules. The new president is going to be a dictator and take your club funding.
And it is gaining serious traction, especially in New York, which is an existential problem for the country.
Because New York is right in the middle.
Geographically and economically, yes. If New York rejects it, the Union is physically split in half. The whole experiment could collapse.
So Alexander Hamilton realizes they're losing the narrative. The pro-Constitution side is getting hammered.
So he steps up. He realizes someone has to launch a massive PR campaign to convince the state to vote yes. He writes Federalist number 1, basically saying, I will answer every single objection you have.
But he knows he can't do it alone. That's way too much writing.
Way too much. So he recruits a team. He gets John Jay, a prominent diplomat from New York, and James Madison, a brilliant political theorist from Virginia who just happened to be in town.
Just hanging around the Confederation Congress.
Right. And they decide to publish this sweeping defense under one collective pseudonym.
Which is such a smart branding move, because the anti-federalists are using names like Cato and Brutus, right?
Yes. Roman moralists and assassins who killed Caesar to save the Republic.
They are branding themselves as the ultimate defenders against tyranny. So how does Hamilton counter that?
He chooses the name Publius, which comes from Publius Valerius Publicola, a Roman aristocrat who helped found the Roman Republic.
But the translation is the best part.
Exactly. It translates to friend of the people.
That is just aggressive PR. The other guys say the Constitution is an elitist plot, so Hamilton literally names his project Friend of the People.
And he had actually used that name before. Back in 1778, he used Publius to expose a corrupt politician named Samuel Chase who was price gouging flour during the war.
Oh, wow. So the brand already had a reputation in New York.
It did. People knew Publius as someone who exposed corruption and defended everyday citizens. It completely disarmed the elitist accusations.
Brilliant. Okay, so we have our team, we have the brand name. Let's break down this group project, starting with the guy who started it all, Alexander Hamilton.
Hamilton is the absolute engine of the Federalist Papers. Out of the 85 essays, he wrote 51 of them.
51? That's like 60% of the whole thing.
It is. He recruited the co-authors, managed the publishers, set the crazy pace, and wrote the opening and closing arguments.
So he's the hyperactive student body president. The project is due in 3 days. He assigns everyone their parts based on their major, and then he just stays up all night, fueled by pure anxiety and caffeine.
Frantically typing 60% of it himself. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the output is staggering, especially given the philosophical depth.
Let's talk about his core political goals in these essays.
Well, in Federalist number 1, he frames the stakes. He asks this massive question: are societies capable of establishing good government from reflection and choice? Or are they destined to depend on accident and force?
Reflection and choice versus accident and force, that's heavy.
It's arguably one of the most important sentences in American political thought. Before this, governments were usually formed by conquering armies or royal bloodlines.
Right, accident and force.
Yeah. Hamilton is telling the public, you have an unprecedented opportunity to sit down, be rational, and design your own destiny.
He's elevating the debate, putting immense pressure on the reader to prove humans can actually govern themselves rationally.
He absolutely is. And then he pivots to the harsh mechanics of power. The Anti-Federalists were terrified of a strong government, but Hamilton argues a weak one is way more dangerous.
Especially in Federalist Nung 70, right?
Yes, not a 70. That's where he argues for a one-man chief executive, an energetic presidency.
Wait, but they just fought a war to get rid of a king. How does he justify demanding a single powerful president? Doesn't that just prove the Anti-Federalists right?
He hits that fear head-on by making it about accountability. Under the old articles, there was no executive branch, just slow, bickering committees in Congress.
Which is the classic group project problem.
Exactly. If a committee is in charge, they disagree, they delay during emergencies, and worst of all, they hide behind each other to avoid blame.
It wasn't my fault. I voted against it in committee.
Right. Hamilton argues a single executive is actually safer, because if things go wrong, the public knows exactly who to blame. You can't hide.
That's a brilliant pivot, turning the fear of a king into a demand for transparency. And he doesn't stop there. He tackles the Supreme Court in number 78.
He does. The Anti-Federalists, specifically Brutus, thought federal judges with life appointments would become this untouchable, tyrannical oligarchy.
Because no one could fire them or correct their mistakes?
Right. But Hamilton counters by laying the groundwork for judicial review. He writes that the judiciary is actually the least dangerous branch.
Because they don't have the army or the money?
Exactly. He says they have neither force nor will, but merely judgment. Congress has the purse, the president has the sword.
The Supreme Court just has opinions.
But he pairs that weakness with a massive implicit power. He argues the courts must have the power to declare laws void if they violate the Constitution.
Which is exactly what the modern Supreme Court does. He outlined it decades before they officially claimed that power.
He did. But Hamilton makes one argument that seems, well, completely hypocritical for a guy calling himself friend of the people.
Oh, Federalist number 84. This one blew my mind when I read the source. He explicitly argues against including a Bill of Rights.
He does.
Which is crazy. Today, the Bill of Rights is practically the only part of the Constitution people can actually quote from memory. Why would he fight that?
It's counterintuitive today, but his logic was rooted in a very strict legal philosophy. The original draft didn't have a list of individual rights.
And the Anti-Federalists were screaming that this was proof of a plot to oppress everyone?
Yes. But Hamilton argued adding a list wasn't just unnecessary, he said it was actively dangerous.
Wait, how is listing my rights dangerous? That sounds like a trap.
It comes down to enumerated powers. He argued the Constitution only granted the government very specific, limited powers.
Okay, so if it doesn't explicitly say Congress can regulate the press, then they just can't.
Exactly. Hamilton's point was, why forbid the government from doing something it hasn't even been given the power to do?
Oh, I see. If you say Congress shall make no law about the press, you're kind of implying that without that sentence, they would have had the power to do it.
Yes. And his deeper fear was a legal doctrine called expressio unius est exclusio ulterius. The explicit mention of one thing is the exclusion of another.
Meaning if you make a list, people will think that's the only list?
Exactly. Hamilton feared that if you write down 10 protected rights, some ambitious future government will come along and say, well, the right to privacy isn't on this list of 10, so it must not exist.
Back to the high school analogy. If the principal says, you have the right to wear red shirts and blue shirts, eventually they'll say, well, the rules don't say you can wear a green shirt, so green shirts are banned.
That is the exact mechanism Hamilton was warning about. He thought the Constitution itself was a Bill of Rights because it strictly limited government power.
But the anti-federalist Brutus completely disagreed with that, right?
Vehemently. Brutus thought that was naive academic nonsense. He argued human nature guarantees rulers will expand their power, and without a hard written boundary, tyranny is inevitable.
And spoiler alert, Brutus basically won that argument. They ratified the Constitution, but everyone agreed to immediately add the first 10 amendments.
The Bill of Rights. But this brings us perfectly to our second author, James Madison, because he found a structural engineering solution to Hamilton's fear about the list.
Right. Madison actually drafted the Bill of Rights, but he understood Hamilton's anxiety. So what did he do?
He wrote the Ninth Amendment.
Which says what, exactly?
It says, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
Oh, wow. It's a constitutional catch-all clause.
Yes. It's a direct response to Federalist number 84. It literally says, just because we made a list doesn't mean this is the whole list.
Madison wrote a software patch to fix the bug Hamilton found. That is so cool. So let's talk about Madison. He's our systems engineer.
He really is. He wrote 29 of the essays. And while Hamilton is driving the schedule with pure force, Madison is obsessed with the underlying physics of the project.
He's the quiet honor student. He's designing the rules so the popular kids on the football team can't just bully the chess club.
Exactly. He is anticipating human misbehavior and building mechanical systems to counteract it. And his absolute masterpiece is Federalist number 10.
Okay, Federalist number 10, what's the central problem he's tackling there?
He is addressing the danger of factions. And we have to be clear, he doesn't just mean political parties.
How does he define it?
He defines a faction as any group of citizens, majority or minority, united by a common passion that is adverse to the rights of others or adverse to the community as a whole.
So basically a mob.
Yeah.
Or a selfish special interest group that would happily destroy the country to get what it wants.
Yes. And at the time, philosophers like Montesquieu argued a republic could only survive if it was geographically tiny, like a small city-state where everyone is homogenous.
Because if everyone is similar, they won't form angry factions.
Right. The anti-federalists used this to argue that a huge, diverse United States would inevitably tear itself apart. You'd have northern merchants, southern farmers, bankers, laborers.
They'd form massive factions and rip each other to shreds. So how does Madison counter that?
By completely inverting the conventional wisdom. Madison argues in number 10 that a massive extended commercial republic is actually the best defense against factions.
Wait, really? How does making it bigger solve the problem?
Well, he says you can't erase the causes of factions, because human nature means people will always have different opinions and unequal wealth. So you have to control the effects.
And you control the effects mechanically.
Yes, by scaling up the playing field. In a small republic, it's super easy for one corrupt faction to get a majority and brutally oppress the minority.
Like in our high school. If the school is tiny and it's just the football team and the debate club, the football team has more guys, they can just vote to take 100% of the school budget for helmets.
And the debate club ceases to exist. That is majority tyranny.
But if Madison expands the school...
He brings in the robotics team, the marching band, the theater kids, the track team, the art students.
Now the football team doesn't have a majority anymore. If they want helmets, they have to negotiate, form temporary coalitions, and actually compromise.
The sheer size and diversity of the school acts as a mechanical shield against any one group becoming a tyrant. It's mathematically impossible for one faction to dominate.
That is so elegant. He takes their biggest fear, the massive size of the country, and turns it into its greatest feature.
He expands on that directly in Federalist number 14, too,
Mm.
defending the concept of the extended republic. But he doesn't just want to control the citizens. He wants to control the government itself.
Which brings us to Federalist number 51, the checks and balances essay.
Right. If number 10 is about controlling the people, no, 51 is about controlling the politicians. And he gives this incredibly profound, cynical assessment of human nature.
The famous quote, right? If men were angels.
Yes. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary.
He's basically looking at this massive maze of vetoes and overlapping jurisdictions he just built and admitting we didn't build this because we trust our leaders. We built it because we know they're going to be selfish.
He embraces the flaw. He says you have to construct the government so that its parts are the means of keeping each other in their proper places. You pit ambition against ambition.
So you don't rely on the president being a saint. You give Congress the power to stop a bad president and the president the power to stop a reckless Congress.
Exactly. You weaponize their personal ambition to protect the constitutional rights of their branch.
Which is exactly what you see today when politicians argue over executive overreach.
Yeah.
You're watching Madison's blueprint play out in real time.
Absolutely. And he also mapped out how this balance works between the national government and the states in Federalist number 39.
The federalism essay.
Yes, dual sovereignty. The anti-federalists said the states would be erased entirely by this new national empire.
But Madison proves it's a hybrid system, right?
He methodically shows that citizens are subject to two different jurisdictions simultaneously, but in distinct spheres. The national government handles war, money, interstate commerce.
And the states handle local criminal law, education, intrastate business.
Right. In your school project analogy, the principal's office has supreme authority to expel a student or negotiate with a rival high school.
But the principal has absolutely no right to tell the homeroom teacher where a student sits or how to grade a spelling test. They share power over the same student body, but in completely separate lanes.
And Madison engineered it so these two layers would constantly be jealous of each other's power, acting as a final check against tyranny.
So we've got Hamilton frantically writing about executive energy, Madison designing these intricate gears. What about John Jay?
Ah, John Jay. He's an incredibly distinguished figure.
Yeah.
He negotiated the Treaty of Paris. He was the Secretary for Foreign Affairs under the Articles of Confederation.
He's got more high-level diplomatic experience than almost anyone in the country.
And yet, out of 85 essays, John Jay wrote exactly 5.
5. Just 5. Our high school analogy really needs to explain this.
Well, John Jay is the highly respected senior who agrees to help launch the project. He writes the introduction to give it an air of authority,
Yeah.
and then he gets a severe case of mono.
Oh, no.
Yeah. He's physically incapacitated and misses almost the entire semester, leaving Hamilton and Madison to pull the all-nighters.
That is painfully relatable. But the 5 essays he did write, they were hyper-focused on his expertise, weren't they?
Very much so. He wrote numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 right at the beginning, and then managed to write number 64 much later. He leveraged his diplomatic resume to address foreign threats.
Because in 1787, the U.S. is not a superpower. It's this weak strip of land surrounded by the British, the French, and the Spanish empires.
Right. And Jay relentlessly hammers the point that a divided America would be irresistible prey for Europe.
The anti-federalists wanted to risk staying a loose confederation, maybe splitting into regional groups.
And Jay says, if you do that, Europe will play us against each other. Britain allies with the North, France with the South, and America just becomes a battleground for European proxy wars.
He's the guy looking at the geopolitical chessboard saying, I negotiate with these empires. If we don't unite with one military and one foreign policy, they will pick us apart.
It was a very sobering, practical survival argument. It totally bypassed the theoretical debates about liberty.
And what about his last essay, number 64?
He recovered enough to defend the Senate's specific treaty-making powers. He explained why the Senate, which is smaller and more stable, should advise and consent on foreign treaties instead of the massive, shifting House of Representatives.
Makes perfect sense. And he didn't completely give up after that, right? Didn't he write a separate pamphlet?
He did. In the spring of 1788, he published an address to the people of the state of New York.
So he handed in an extra credit assignment directly to the teacher.
You could definitely say that. And Hamilton actually cited Jay's pamphlet proudly in the final Federalist paper, number 85. so his intellectual weight was still felt.
Okay, so we have the players, we have their philosophical arguments. Let's talk logistics. Because writing 85 graduate-level political science essays is one thing. Publishing them in the 1780s is another.
The logistics are staggering. It was designed to be a media blitzkrieg.
When did this start?
Late October 1787. And they were publishing simultaneously in 3 major New York newspapers.
And how fast were they writing? I know Hamilton was frantic, but what was the actual pace?
At their peak, they were publishing up to 3 or 4 massive, highly complex essays every single week.
3 or 4 a week. They are writing, typesetting by hand, and printing a thesis every 2 days. That's an insane schedule.
It was a deliberate tactical choice. Historian Gary Wills points out that the goal was to literally suffocate the opposition's ability to respond.
Just drown them in content.
Yeah. Wills wrote, "Who, given ample time, could have answered such a battery of arguments, and no time was given?"
That's the ultimate debate tactic. If Brutus reads number 10, spends 3 days writing a thoughtful counter-argument, by the time it hits the press, Publius has already published 11, 12, 13, and 14.
Brutus is constantly a week behind the conversation.
Publius just controls the narrative by outwriting them.
And public demand got so high that before the newspaper run even finished, a publishing firm started binding the essays into a permanent book. The first volume came out in March 1788.
They turned their op-eds into a physical textbook while the debate was still happening. But here's where it gets really interesting for me. The whodunit mystery.
Yes, the authorship mystery.
Because they publish under a fake name, for decades no one actually knew who wrote which specific essay.
It's one of the great literary puzzles in American history.
Obviously, they used pseudonyms at first, so people wouldn't just say, you guys wrote the Constitution, of course you like it. But why keep the exact breakdown a secret for so long after ratification?
Because of the toxic political climate in the 1790s, shortly after ratification, Hamilton and Madison became bitter, mortal political enemies.
Right. Hamilton starts the Federalist Party for a strong central bank, and Madison joins Jefferson to start the Democratic-Republican Party to fight Hamilton.
Exactly. They were tearing each other apart in the press. Neither man wanted to publicly claim the Publius essays because it would highlight how closely they used to collaborate. The unified voice became a political liability.
But the secret finally leaks out in 1804, under crazy circumstances.
Very dramatic. In July 1804, Hamilton engages in his famous fatal duel with Aaron Burr. Just days before the duel, he stops by a lawyer friend's office and hides a piece of paper in a book.
And what's on the paper?
It's a detailed list claiming authorship of the essays. Hamilton claimed he was the sole author of 63 of the 85 essays.
So on his way out the door, he leaves a note basically saying, by the way, I did all the work.
That list became public after he died, and an 1810 printing actually assigned authorship based on his claims.
But James Madison was still alive, and he definitely saw this list. How did the systems engineer react to the project manager stealing all the credit?
Madison was characteristically methodical and very polite, but he firmly corrected the record. In 1818, he provided his own list.
And did it match?
No. Madison's list directly contradicted Hamilton's on 12 specific essays. Madison claimed he, not Hamilton, wrote numbers 49 through 58, as well as 62 and 63.
12 disputed essays. Did he just call Hamilton a liar? How do you call out a dead founding father?
He framed it as a tragic error of memory. He said the discrepancies were, quote, owing doubtless to the hurry in which his memorandum was made out.
He was in a hurry. That is brutal, elegant, 18th century shade. Poor Alexander was so stressed about Aaron Burr shooting him that he accidentally claimed 12 of my masterpieces.
Exactly. And Madison had circumstantial proof, too. He pointed out that Hamilton's list had documentable errors about John Jay's contributions. Hamilton credited Mum 54 to Jay, but it was a verified fact that Jay wrote number 64.
Ah, so Madison is saying, if his memory was wrong about Jay, it's definitely wrong about my 12.
Right. But it remained a historical standoff for 150 years.
So how do we actually know who's right?
It wasn't solved until 1964, and it required crossing political history with advanced mathematics.
Okay, you have to explain how math solves a literary mystery.
2 statisticians, Frederick Mosteller and David Wallace, used Bayesian statistical inference. They didn't look at the philosophical arguments because Publius had a unified voice.
Right, they all sounded like Publius, so what did they look for?
Unconscious stylistic fingerprints, specifically the frequency of non-contextual filler words.
Like forensic linguistics, what kind of words?
Words a writer uses without thinking. They calculated exactly how often Hamilton used the word while versus Madison using the word whilst. They tracked words like upon, enough, and by.
And they established a mathematical baseline for both guys?
Exactly. Then they ran the 12 disputed essays through this model, and the math was definitive. The linguistic fingerprints perfectly matched Madison's unconscious writing habits.
No way.
Yes. For example, Hamilton used the word upon at a vastly higher rate than Madison. The disputed essays reflected Madison's much lower rate.
So Madison's polite shade was mathematically proven. Hamilton really was just in a hurry and overclaimed his word count. It took computers in the 60s to figure out who wrote a newspaper column in 1788.
It's incredible.
Okay, so the project is finished, published, bound into books. The authors are finally identified. Now we have to ask the most important question of this whole deep dive.
Did it actually work?
Right. Did this legendary PR blitz achieve its immediate goal in New York?
This is where we arrive at the great overarching irony. The whole point was to sway the delegates voting at the New York ratifying convention.
So what happened at the convention?
The sources reveal a shocking reality. The immediate impact of the Federalist Papers on that vote was almost completely negligible.
Wait, what? They wrote the definitive text on American government, published 3 times a week, built arguments we use today, and the New York voters just ignored it.
Let's look at the brutal math. Despite this massive media blitz, the actual voters remained solidly anti-Federalist. When the delegates arrived, there were only 19 pro-Constitution Federalists.
And how many anti-Federalists?
46.
46 to 19. They had a supermajority. Hamilton's brilliant campaign didn't even make a dent.
Historian John Kaminsky explicitly points this out. The anti-Federalist political machine in New York, led by Governor George Clinton, was just too entrenched. Hamilton's profound essays on judicial review didn't change the minds of farmers terrified of a distant central government.
I am completely confused then. If the PR campaign failed and the convention hated the Constitution by a 2-to-1 margin, how did it actually pass in New York? They didn't form their own country.
They ratified it because of harsh geopolitical realities, not because of Publius's prose.
Explain them.
Under the old articles, you needed a unanimous vote of all 13 states to change anything. But the new Constitution changed the rules. Once 9 states ratified it, the new government would officially start among those 9.
Lowering the threshold. 9 states equals a new country.
Exactly. And while New York was digging its heels in, the rest of the country moved forward. Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Connecticut.
Huh.
By the time New York finally approached a vote on July 26, 1788, 10 other states had already ratified it.
10 states, so the new government already existed.
Crucially, Virginia had ratified it in June. Virginia was the largest, wealthiest, most powerful state. Once they joined, the debate was functionally over. The United States was happening, with or without New York.
Oh, it wasn't about the brilliance of Federalist Number 10. It was absolute geopolitical FOMO.
Fear of missing out, exactly. Historian Albert Furtwängler notes that New York's refusal would make them an odd outsider.
If they voted no, they'd be this isolated, independent nation completely surrounded by the new U.S., cut off economically, vulnerable militarily.
Virginia's ratification essentially put a gun to New York's head. Voting no was geopolitical suicide.
So Hamilton's masterpiece didn't save the day in New York. Geography did. Did the essays do anything useful for ratification anywhere?
They did find an alternative use. Hamilton actually shipped the bound volumes down to the Virginia Convention. Furtwängler says it functioned as a highly effective debater's handbook for the Federalists there.
Oh, a cheat sheet. The delegates could just flip to an essay, read Madison's exact points on federalism, and hammer the opposition on the floor.
Yes, but even in Virginia, the essays were secondary. The real deciding factors were Madison debating brilliantly in person and the implicit support of George Washington.
Right, Washington wanting it to pass carries infinitely more weight than a pseudonymous newspaper column. Okay, this is fascinating. If it failed as a local PR tool in NY and was just a backup cheat sheet in VA, why are we still talking about it? Why is it the most important political writing in American history?
Because of its afterlife. It failed to change the immediate election math, but it succeeded beyond their wildest dreams in becoming the ultimate authoritative legal operating manual for the government.
How does a failed newspaper column become a legal manual?
Well, the Constitution is remarkably brief. It lays out the framework, but doesn't explain the deep logic behind every clause. Almost immediately, massive legal fights break out over what the government is actually allowed to do.
And when the Supreme Court needs to figure out a vague clause, they look backward.
Right. They used the Federalist Papers as the definitive contemporary account of the framers' original intentions.
It's like finding a piece of legacy software with weird code and reading the original developer's notes to figure out why they built it that way.
That is a perfect analogy. And they started doing it incredibly early. Our sources point out that as early as 1798, just 10 years later, the Supreme Court cited them in a landmark case called Calder v. Bull.
What were they trying to figure out in 1798?
The exact limits of ex post facto laws, laws that retroactively make an action illegal after someone committed it. The court cited Publius to explain why the framers explicitly banned those laws.
They're saying, we don't have to guess. Hamilton and Madison explain the exact logic in the papers.
Yes, and that trend never stopped. They've been cited in major cases about foreign affairs, separation of powers, executive authority. By the year 2000, the sources say they had been explicitly quoted 291 times by the Supreme Court.
291 times. That's staggering. But wait, I'm thinking about the mechanics of this and I want to push back. There's a massive structural irony here about how judges use these papers today.
You are hitting on one of the most contentious debates in constitutional law, the question of deference.
Yes. If federal judges are using these papers to discover original intent, how much legal weight should they actually give to the secret, personal intentions of Hamilton and Madison? Because I read the sources, and James Madison himself had a very strong opinion on this, didn't he?
This is the ultimate aha moment of our deep dive. Even Chief Justice John Marshall warned about this in 1819. He said their opinions deserve great respect, but the right to judge their correctness must be retained. They aren't infallible law.
But Madison went way further than Marshall. Madison explicitly told the future not to use his essays to interpret the law.
He was extraordinarily strict about it. He viewed the Constitution as a strict legal contract. In an 1821 letter to a man named Thomas Ritchie, the father of the Constitution completely dismantled the modern theory of original intent regarding his own work.
What exactly did he say?
He wrote that the legitimate meaning of the instrument must be derived from the text itself. And if the text is ambiguous, he explicitly states where you must not look. He says the meaning must never be sought in the opinions or intentions of the body which planned and proposed the Constitution.
Meaning, do not look at my secret notes from Philadelphia, and do not look at the private intentions of the guys who wrote the PR essays.
Exactly. He argued the drafters were just architects drawing a blueprint. The blueprint has no legal power. He said you must look for the meaning in the sense attached to it by the people in their respective state conventions.
That is profound. He's saying it's not law because he wrote it, it's law because the people voted for it. The only intentions that matter legally are the intentions of the voters who signed the contract.
He is enforcing a strict democratic theory of law. The author of the Ultimate Operating Manual is telling the future, this manual is just my personal philosophical opinion. The true legal power belongs to the user agreement signed by the public.
And yet, modern courts still elevate Publius to the level of near sacred text. That is a massive, lingering irony.
It really is.
Okay, let's pull all this complex history together. We've gone on quite the journey today. We started with a chaotic high school group project in 1787. We had Hamilton, the frantic project manager, pulling all-nighters to write 60% of the defense for an energetic government.
We had Madison, the systems engineer, designing intricate mechanical checks and balances, diluting factions through sheer geographic size because he knew men were not angels.
And John Jay, the sideline diplomat, delivering that vital warning about the terrifying geopolitical dangers of a divided house. Together, as Publius, they wrote a masterpiece.
A philosophical blitzkrieg aimed at a local problem. And even though they totally failed to change the mathematical reality in New York.
Saved only by Virginia and massive geopolitical FOMO.
Their rushed, pseudonymous columns transcended their immediate failure. They became the universal principles, the definitive lens for American law centuries later.
It's an incredible testament to the enduring quality of their ideas. The process was messy, the goal was missed, but the architecture was so sound, we still live inside it. Now, before we wrap up, we promised a final provocative thought from the source text. What do you have for us?
I want to look at the very end of the project. Beyond all the mechanics, the vetoes, the federalism, the Federalist Papers begin and end with a dire warning about human psychology. In the very last paper, number 85, Hamilton steps back and offers a lesson of moderation.
What's the lesson?
He warns the reader against hazarding the fragile new nation to the military despotism of a successful demagogue.
A demagogue. Someone who uses passion and prejudice to gain power instead of reason.
Exactly. Hamilton is warning about ambitious leaders who use highly divisive appeals, stoking anger and fear, aiming ultimately at tyranny. He understood the greatest threat wasn't a foreign army. It was the internal vulnerability of the public to a charismatic manipulator. 230-something years later, the incredibly complex framework they defended still stands. It was explicitly built as a mechanical bulwark against that very human flaw, something to seriously mull over as you watch today's political landscape unfold.
That is a deeply powerful thought to leave on. The machinery was built to survive our worst instincts. We just have to keep the machine running. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Publius. We hope you walk away feeling more informed about the mechanics of the Constitution and maybe appreciative of the chaotic, imperfect waters of history. Because sometimes, even when a project looks like a complete failure, you end up writing the blueprint for the future. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.